By 30, you should be married, have a six-figure job, $1 million in the bank, and 2 sports cars in the driveway, right? Well, for most people, this is not what their lives will look like at 30. Many 30-year-olds don't even have a dollar to their name. And if this sounds like you, then don't worry, because I'm about to share the exact steps you can take to turn around your financial misfortune and catch up to those your age in no time. As someone who has recently turned 30, I can tell you that at this age, you really start to finally feel as though you are an adult. Maybe it's the mounting bills and responsibilities that enter your life. Maybe it's the increased pressures at work. But at 30, there is no refuting the fact that you are now entering the next chapter of your life. However, one thing that all adults need is money. And sadly, many people hit age 30 without a single dollar to their name. And as you can imagine, this is a major problem. Now, you may be wondering how someone could have finished school and worked for many years, yet have no money to show for it. So let's dive into why that is before I share my foolproof plan for building up your savings from scratch. If you ask me, there are really a few reasons that people hit age 30 with nothing in the bank, and while some may not be your fault, all can be remedied with the right strategy in place. So the first reason people hit 30 with no savings is because they were never taught proper money management skills. I know for more financially educated people, the notion of not spending more than you make and avoiding high-interest debt is obvious. But if your parents, teachers, or friends didn't share these important money principles with you, then doing so may not be as obvious as you would expect. Second, many young adults saddle themselves with endless amounts of student debt, and as a result, spend years working in order to pay it off. Now, if you've never had student debt, you won't understand how punishing it can be. So let me illustrate this with an example. Right now, the average college student graduates with $37,000 worth of debt. At an interest rate of 3%, that would cost repayers roughly $100 a month in interest. Now, obviously $100 a month isn't an insanely high amount, but when paired with the next financial constraint we are going to talk about, $100 is more impactful than one would expect. The next hurdle many young adults are running into these days are extremely low salaries. Over the last 50 years, real wages have barely budged. And as you can imagine, when your income is barely allowing you to keep the lights on, meeting your debt obligations and saving money will be a challenge. Speaking of debt, if there is one culprit that puts young adults into debt, it's spending to keep up with others. I know this is a cliche statement to make, but most of our spending decisions are based on the opinions of others, whether we will admit it or not. For instance, most 20-somethings will buy clothes to look like their favorite influencers or take trips to show off to their friends. One of the biggest examples I'm seeing of this these days are people trying to throw the biggest weddings possible simply to be able to one-up the events that their peers have put on in the past. However, the problem is that there will always be people that can outspend you, so this competition is one that can only last so long, and in many cases is exactly why people hit 30 and have no savings. Speaking of entering your dirty 30s, when it comes to savings, in my eyes, there are 2 amounts you should be aware of. The first is how much your peers have, because in this case, a bit of friendly competition can be a good thing. Alternatively, you should know how much it's recommended you have, and I will give my controversial opinion on this matter when we get there. So first, what does everyone else your age have when it comes to savings? Well, as per the Federal Reserve's Board Survey of Consumer Finances, those 35 and under on average have a savings balance of $11,200. Now, depending on how you responded to this number will probably be a sign of the financial situation you presently find yourself in. For instance, if you thought this was a large amount of savings, then chances are you have some work to do in the savings department. However, if you thought this amount was extremely low, then you may be overachieving when it comes to saving money. Now, here's where things get interesting, because while the average 30-something has just over $10,000 in the bank, the recommended amount of savings at this age is quite a bit more. The quick and dirty rule when it comes to savings is that by age 30, you should have 1 full year of income saved. So if you make $50,000 a year, you should have $50,000 saved, whether that's in your bank or investment accounts. To me, this is a reasonable target, and if you agree, let me know by hitting that like button below. If we assume that you graduated college at 22 and have been working for 8 years, saving up $50,000 would only require you to save just over $500 a month during this time. However, as you can see, most people are far from having this amount saved. In fact, the average savings balance of most Americans only hits the $50,000 mark, somewhere between the age of 45 and 54, which means that if you aren't on pace to hit the savings target I just mentioned, you definitely aren't alone. However, this is where my controversial opinion comes into play. In my eyes, by 30, you should have much more than 1 year's salary saved up already. Let me explain why that is and how it can really help you build up your wealth moving forward. First, in your 20s, you have the most amount of free time that you will ever have for the rest of your life. This means that if you use that time productively, you can make an insane amount of money and easily surpass 1 year's salary saved by 30. However, most people fall into the Netflix and chill trap during this decade of their life. Then, by 32, things happen. The first thing that happens by 30 is that the responsibilities in your life consume all of your waking time. As you progress up the corporate ladder, work becomes more time intensive, and given that we just talked about how stagnant wages are these days, this route probably won't allow you to save up a ton of money in short order. Plus, if you have a family and kids, the prospect of earning outside your job becomes even less feasible. Then, you have to add on the fact that as we get older, our expenses will naturally increase. For instance, diapers for your child aren't free, nor is paying for your wedding or moving into a bigger home. The point is, unlike what many people think, building wealth doesn't become easier with age, given that your two biggest resources of time and money become more constrained over time. However, if you were to use your 20s productively and say put away 2 years worth of salary, all of a sudden you would make building wealth incredibly easier. For instance, if you had $100,000 invested at age 30, if you never invested another dollar, by 65, you would have over $1 million to your name. But if you're not in that position right now, don't worry. We are going to go over the exact steps you can take, starting with no savings, and still achieve this lofty financial goal in the process. For those with no savings, regardless of your age, what I recommend is that you follow what I've coined the lease model. The lease model is a 5-step model that takes you from the financial basement to the top floor in a hurry, with the first step being learning. If you're 30 with no savings, there are really only 2 things you need to learn to get your savings journey started. The first is that no one is coming to save you. At 30, you should realize that all of the success you want in life will be the result of your own actions. And waiting on someone to hand you success is a losing strategy. This is the harsh, honest truth. And if you appreciate that, then make sure you subscribe by hitting that big red button below. To add to this, you should learn and appreciate just how powerful building wealth can be from both a financial and quality of life perspective. Financially, I just shared that by 30, if you have $100,000 invested, that you can become a millionaire without lifting a finger. And if you put in the work now, you can be in that same position in just a few years' time. Plus, when you do start to amass more money, you will gain benefits like less financial stress, more confidence, and can afford to enjoy some of the luxuries that life has to offer. Therefore, learning is the first step in turning around your financial life for the better. Next, there is the elimination step. This is where you will eliminate all of your high-interest debt for good. Now that you're no longer in your 20s, it's time to leave financial baggage in the past, and this includes the high-interest debts you've amassed to date. No matter how much debt you presently have, the approach I always recommend is paying it down from those with the highest interest rates first, which mathematically saves you the most amount of interest. However, if you feel that paying down your smaller debts makes more sense for you from a psychological standpoint, then go ahead. Ultimately, the approach you can stick to is the one that will make you debt-free the fastest. However, it's one thing to eliminate your debt, but it's another to avoid getting into more of it over time, which brings us to step number 3, which is to adapt. Chances are that your lack of savings is a direct result of the lifestyle you've been living to date. And if you want any shot at living a life of financial excess, then you need to adapt to align yourself with your future rich lifestyle. How do you do this? Let me explain. If you look at those who get rich the quickest, they tend to live very frugal lifestyles. They don't do this because they can't afford to buy expensive things, but because they have a higher purpose. And that purpose is to be as wealthy as possible. How do they do this? Simple, they funnel all of their excess cash into investments that will appreciate in value over time. However, to do this, you need to have that cash in the first place, and you get access to this money by adapting your lifestyle. This can be done in a few ways, from reducing your core expenses such as housing and entertainment, all the way down to spending more of your time making money. Amassing savings and building wealth doesn't just happen by chance. It takes deliberate and constant efforts. And one of those efforts leads us right into step number 4. In step 4, we have the saving step. This is where you are going to build ironclad savings practices that ensure that the money you're making remains in your pockets and not the pockets of everyone else. This can be done in 2 easy steps. First, use a budget that factors in saving. I use the split budget that incorporates a percentage of my income into savings and the rest towards spending. So, for instance, if I wanted to save 50% of my income, I have to align my spending to only sum to 50% of my after-tax income. This way, as long as I spend according to my budget, I will naturally be saving money over time. The other element in your savings game plan is to understand what actually brings value to your life. So many people spend money on clothes, cars, watches, and the like, and get enjoyment out of them for a day or week and then never think about them again. Now, I'm not against buying these things, but in my opinion, you should only buy them if they truly add value to your life. Otherwise, that money could be saved and invested and should be, especially if right now you have no savings to your name. Finally, we have the last step in the lease model, which is to earn. Earning more money will forever trump any other financial tactic out there because of its unlimited upside. For instance, it's hard for the average spender to outspend a $1 million a month income, or for the average retail investor to keep pace with someone who is making this kind of money. Simply put, if you have no savings, you should be using every dollar of disposable income you have to learn how to make more money. As you can imagine, when you are making $500,000 a year, you will naturally be able to save more than when you are making $50,000. So focus on this one financial element the most, and I promise you won't be stuck having no savings for much longer.